Snobs. You've got to hate snobs, man. Snobs are some of the worst human beings on the planet because they will basically declare, without any tangible evidence, without any clear evidence, that there is only one way to do things and it's the way we like them, or moreover, or better yet, it's the way that is typically accepted by institutions. For example, in art, this exists, right? This exists in art, this also exists in storytelling. It exists every single where. You are going to find any person playing any type of game, writing any type of poetry, writing any type of music, any type of lyrics. And there's one type of this that is really frowned upon. In art in general, escapist art is definitely the most frowned upon. And today, I'm going to make an argument to you and me. I'm going to make an argument to you as to why that is absolute nonsense. And we're going to start with young adult stories. Now, some of the YA authors like Cassandra Clare or Stephanie Meyer, who write like Immortal Instruments, you also have, Twilight, that's obvious, or E.L. James, for example, the 50 Shades of Grey. In fact, the whole of erotica, they really don't like that. They think it's just nonsense. They don't think it's art. Well, I'm here to argue that they actually serve a function. And the function there is not really any inferior to any other type of art. Because the question is, what is a good story? And there are two ways of answering this question. And these two ways will counter the narrative of snobs, right? And the general theme, for example, with young adult stories is that they cannot be used in order to actually depict real struggles. But have you ever seen, read, watched, listened to The Fault in Our Stars? Have you ever listened to any of these other, for instance, young adult stories that are critically acclaimed, that actually depict proper human struggles, both with illnesses, both with, romance, both with other struggles such as, losing loved ones, war, suffering, poverty. All of these different struggles have been depicted. It's not common, right? Yes, very well done YA is it's not common. It's not everywhere. However, you will find it. For example, The Hate You Give is another story that is very good in this particular regard. And so the main argument that I want to make is that the genre does not have a monopoly on nuance. So nuance, that snobs will argue that some genres have nuance, others do not. But I want to argue that nuance and the genre are separate. My understanding is, and my opinion is, nuance and the genre are completely separate. You can have, a terribly written, cliched, mumbo-jumbo, pretentious literary novel. You can also have a brilliant, well-written, children's book, middle grade book, young adult book, new adult book, whatever, an adult, grim dark, light, fantasy, any type of story. Animation can have, nuance, for example. The main thing when it comes to storytelling, for instance, with nuance, what we have is you take a look at the story, the characters, and the struggles that they face. Literally, for instance, will actually depict the nuance of the real world in the real world, right? No issues there. However, you can have literary fantasy, which is depicting the struggles of the real world in fantasy, in a fantastic story with dragons. I mean, a dragon is not just an awesome fire-breathing monster. He is also depicting greed and power and lust for power, okay? And the damage that can have. If you take a look at Smaug from, Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit from Middle-earth, you see that this guy inflicts tremendous amounts of damage because of his greed. A dragon is not just a dragon. There is nuance to it, right? There is dwarf sickness. Dwarf sickness in Middle-earth is not a random made-up fantasy thing. It's talking about how greed can morph and corrupt people. Okay? And so this is nuance. This is a human struggle. This is a human conflict being depicted in a fantasy setting. You can also depict this in the real world. You can show, for instance, Wolf of Wall Street. Wolf of Wall Street is a literary movie. Okay? You can read countless other literary books. They will be depicting greed in our real world. What does it look like in our world? You can also explore the concept with fantastical elements. At the end of the day, you can always explore it. The genre, therefore, does not have a monopoly on nuance, right? And when it comes to romance, romance can have tremendous amount of nuance. You can actually depict the struggles of a family, the struggles of people who love each other, couples. You can depict for example, separations. You can depict arranged marriages. You can depict all of these things. In a fantasy setting, you can depict an arranged marriage and the impact that has on the psychology, on the emotions and the mental health of people and the two people that are involved. What happens between them? How does that happen? How does that relate to society, class division, poverty, wealth? You can depict all of that in romance. Again, once more, the genre doesn't have a monopoly on nuance. Nuance can be also depicted in children's animations, okay? Nuance can be depicted in adult animation. Nuance can be depicted in Pixar animation. Go watch WALL-E. Go watch all of these Pixar movies. For example, Toy Story 1, 2, 3, 4. Every time you'll see that the characters are going through tremendous emotional upheaval, which is very significant. Therefore, even though you have toys talking, mumbling, running around, bumbling into each other, they will still have nuance, right? Nuance, therefore, is not something that a genre has a monopoly on. These snobs gotta stop because it's dumb. You sound insecure. Dostoevsky is not the only guy who can write a nuanced story. There are countless ways to write it. If you think that is the only way to write it, you are unread. But another thing that I want to talk about is specifically to escapist art, escapist fantasy or escapist romance or escapist, YA or escapist sci-fi fiction, right? It is not an issue. And the primary reason why is because we don't always want to read a nitty-gritty, nuanced story. Sometimes I don't want to read that. Sometimes I just want to read about a good guy and a bad guy in a fantasy world. Let's go on a journey. Sometimes people just don't want to read, and sometimes you don't want to read a literary story. Sometimes you don't want to read about heavy subject material. Sometimes audiences would prefer if the subject material is much lighter, because you know why? They've had a much tougher day in the real world. Yes, they've had the dose of literary stories. Now, how about we go to ancient Egypt and we have this magic system involving mummies and zombies, and there is an epic struggle between empires and blah blah, and it's all fantastical. Yes, so there is the first argument, which is the genre doesn't have a monopoly on nuance. Any genre can be nuanced, but on top of that, escapist fiction serves a function, and it's a very simple function. And we need to actually stop gatekeeping, and stop gatekeeping all these different stories. I accept, for example, YA for what it is, and for how it is. For most of the time, it's really not that dense of a material. I have stopped reading it, but I'm not going to go around and be a snob about it and actually attack people. Right? And so this is the reality. And by the way, I'm not immune to this too. Back then, I used to only read literary. I used to also only write literary. And so in that context, I used to really look down on fantasy. No, you can be doing literary, you can be writing literary, but you also can be not looking down on other genres, other artists, other writers. Exactly. So in that context, even I am not immune to it. It's just that I have grown out of that phase, and I have come to understand that actually nuance can be done in any way that you can imagine. It's about you as the writer. It's about how far you want to go. It's about what you want to depict and how you want to execute that particular general idea that you have, that theme or that lie versus truth, or that character arc, that development arc. Exactly. So these are the two general arguments. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. I wish you a great day. Have a nice one. Bye.